Hey everybody, this is Alan Fine and I'm here with Anja Bauermeister, who is the head of tourism information for Torgau, and Brigitte Verster, head of culture and tourism department for Torgau as well. I am here learning about this city, which is a wonderful place to send your clients when they've done everything and they are interested in the history of the Reformation and the end of World War II. Big topics we're going to cover here on Insider Travel Report. Thank you for hosting me and taking me around and opening my eyes to what Torgau has to offer. Anja, let's first go with you. Why Torgau? Why should travel advisors be sending people here?
Because Torgau is a very historical and old Renaissance town, and people who are already here tell us that they are really impressed about the amounts of old buildings, about the history which can still be seen everywhere in town, about our beautiful castle and.
Okay. And so how do they get here?
They can go here if they choose Leipzig. They can go there by train. It takes 45 minutes, and they can come by car as well, which takes them approximately 1 hour from Leipzig, and the distance to Berlin are 1.5 hours by car.
Yeah. And how much time should a guest use or save for this trip?
We recommend to plan 2 days a week and something like that. So there is a lot of time to see everything and also to recover during in the nature which is surrounding Torgau.
Okay. So now let's talk about the architecture. When we started our tour this morning, we walked down into the big plaza. Tell us about that, please.
We started at the market square and looked at the fountain. This fountain shows a jester. His name was Klaus Nahr. He lived in the 15th century, and he was seen as a prophet. People admired him because he talked about things that didn't happen at this time. He looked in the future.
He knew we were going to talk about him. He told people someday they're going to talk about me on Insider Travel Report.
He was really famous, and he worked at the court, and the electors, they loved him and they asked him for his advice. Although he was a jester.
Please tell us about the buildings that you said they were from the Renaissance.
Yes, Torgau is a Renaissance town. All buildings you can see in the center of the city were created in the 15th, 16th century, so Renaissance. And Torgau was very lucky while the Second World War because it wasn't destroyed.
Right. So then after that, we walked and we looked inside. Hidden away is the oldest church.
Yes, the Nikolai Church, it's the oldest church created in the 13th century, and it's a place of historical importance because there worked a priest. His name was Valentin Tam, and just 2 years after Martin Luther published his 95 Theses, he held the first baptism in a Protestant manner and the first sermon in German language, and that were some of the most important statements of Martin Luther. So the start of the Reformation, we can say that happened here at Torgau.
So then we walked to a Franciscan abbey,
yeah,
because it has this railing that begins the story of Catherine, which we're going to follow as we do our tour. Tell us about the railing, please.
This railing that was part of an art project here in Torgau, and the figures show the life of Catherine. When she was very young, only 5 years old, her father brought her into a monastery. She became a nun, but years later, she got the informations of Martin Luther, and she decided that the life as a nun in a monastery, that's not what God wants from her. So she decided to leave this monastery, but she needed help. There was a trader, a counselor here from Torgau. His name was Leonhard Koppe, and he helped 12 nuns to escape of this abbey. And Catherine von Bora, that was her first name, she stayed for 2 years in the house of Lucas Cranach the Elder. She lived there for 2 years, and then she was asked what she wants to do, whom she wants to marry. And she herself, she said, I would like to marry Martin Luther.
Yeah, no, that's reaching. That's, yeah.
Yes, that's very special because at this period, women didn't have many rights. They were not allowed to sign a contract or everything. Normally, girls didn't go to school. There was no need for them to learn reading and writing. But it's interesting. It was Martin Luther. He said, no, as well, the girls have to learn to read and to write because they must be able to read the Bible to care for their souls.
So then they actually married, and because of that, she was able to have more influence.
Yes, and she played an important role as wife from Martin Luther. She founded a students' pension, so a lot of students lived together with Martin Luther, and they wrote down the ideas and the statements of Martin Luther. We call these written informations the table talks, and we know a lot about the person of Martin Luther and about the ideas and the reforms just because of these table talks and just because of the students.
According to the Bannister, and the rest of our tour, we're going to then see later in life when she had an accident, broke her hip, and then we're going to go to her final residence. So now we went where to next?
She lived in Wittenberg, but in Wittenberg the plague broke out. People escaped from Wittenberg, and Catherine wanted to go to Torgau together with her 2 youngest children. But when she arrived at Torgau, she had an accident. She fell down from the horse-drawn chariot and broke her pelvis. And then she was brought here in Torgau into a house, and there was a woman, a widow. She cared very, very good for her. But also at this time there was no help for Catherine. She died a few months later, and then the next day she was buried in Torgau, and her grave is still here in Torgau in the town church St. Mary.
Okay, we'll see that in a moment, but meanwhile the death house has become a wonderful museum.
Yes, and as I know, it's the only museum, the only exhibition that concerns the life of Catherine Luther.
And let's talk about that statue that's in the middle.
And it shows Catherine on the one side as a very shy woman. When she was a nun, of course, she didn't have to say very much. But on the other side, we can see the self-determined woman, very brave. She looks straight into the eyes of everybody who looks at her. And so that shows the very interesting person of Catherine.
The museum also shows how much of a public figure Catherine was, and so because there's a lot of memorabilia, almost like she's a rock star, so to speak. Let's talk about that, please.
Yes, at this time, Martin Luther and his wife, Catherine, as well, they were really very famous and well known. We've got a lot of paintings about Catherine as well, and that wasn't common that a woman was painted. That shows they all knew very well about the important role of Catherine, who supported and helped her husband.
So next we went to the priest's house. Tell us about that, please.
Georg Spalatin, he worked as a private secretary of the elector, so he was really in the center of the power. He had the possibility to protect Martin Luther and to find new light for the Reformation. There are a lot of letters written by Georg Spalatin. We can read them today, and that shows that he was a networker. He had the contact with a lot of people, very important for the Reformation. And the other one, who's shown in this exhibition, John Volte, he was a musician. He translated hymns from the Latin language, and in these songs he described the ideas of Martin Luther. He wrote the first hymn book, the first chant book for the Protestant Church. And together with Martin Luther, they invented the new liturgy for the Protestant sermon. So each person about we talk, Spalatin, John Walter, Lucas Cranach, each one on his position was very important for the Reformation.
Not to be crass, but the way I hear this is this was his marketing department, because you're talking about a populace that couldn't read. And so how do you get this new information, this new way of thinking out? Well, you do it through pictures for paintings, you do it through music, you do it through an oral legacy. And so these gentlemen were really supporters in that respect.
Yes. And very important.
We went from there to the church where Catherine's buried.
Yes, that's a town church, St. Mary's, and inside we've got her original tombstone donated from her children, and this tombstone shows the coat of arms of Martin Luther and as well of her original family von Bora. And in her hands, she holds a book, and of course that's the Bible, because that was the first and the main statement of her husband. He said, the Bible is the only source of our religion.
All right, so then we went up to the palace, and the first thing you see is a moat. Tell us what was in the moat.
In this moat, there are 3 brown bears, and that's not only a joke for the tourists, but it has tradition. It was the elector who gave the order to dig this bear moat because he loved to hunt. And in the high days of the castle, there were around about 300 people who used to work for the elector and his family, and all these people needed food. And they brought them, the living bears, inside this bear moat, and later on they were eaten.
Well, no, but they didn't hunt them in the moat. They grew them there, and then they sent them out. Okay. Now, in the castle, we see a couple of interesting things. One is this spiral staircase. Tell us about that, please.
This spiral staircase is really very special. There's only one you can compare, and that's in the Castle Blois in France. This spiral staircase is only stabilized by the pillars exterior. So people, even today, we wonder how were they able 500 years ago to construct such a spiral staircase, and that it still stands today.
And then we climbed it. I got some shots of the palace, and then, but at the top of the stairs, there's a doorway.
Yes, this doorway, it shows the electors, it shows Frederick the Wise. He gave the order to kidnap Martin Luther. That was a trick.
So that was the thing. I said kidnap him, but he kind of wanted to go. Well, you couldn't let the powers that be know that you were actually rescuing him.
Yes, he wanted to protect him, but he didn't want to be attacked by the emperor and by the pope. So it was a trick. He said, we will kidnap him. He gave the order to bring him to a castle of his own.
Not knowing which one. He had 3 or more.
Yes. So he couldn't go to the emperor or to the pope, and he could say very seriously, I don't know where he is, Martin Luther. But he knew that he's safe.
Also, there's an example of early 1500 graffiti?
Yes, we always talk about the youth today and that they make and like graffiti, but even 500 years ago, inside we found these graffitis that are special words, but written on the pillars. Yeah.
So from the spiral staircase, we went to the church that's inside the palace.
Yes, it's a very famous church because worldwide it's the first church which was constructed from the beginning as a Protestant church, and this church was consecrated by Martin Luther himself. The pulpit inside, it's the original one where he stood and held the first sermon in this church. So we've got a lot of tourists from worldwide who want to see this church because they know it was consecrated by Martin Luther himself. And he died 1.5 years later, so it's the only church he consecrated himself.
Now, as a finale, let's talk about the really human story of trying to end World War II in this area and what that was like. You took me to a location of a monument and then told me a really great story.
That's the monument of the Link Up, and it was created in order by the Soviet Army just at the end of the Second World War. And the reason why it is here is that the American and the Soviet Army, they met each other here. So in Torgau started the beginning of the end of the Second World War. That was April the 25th, 1945. But how it happened, this contact between these big armies, that wasn't planned. It was by chance. There were a few soldiers who didn't obey their orders, and they decided that they wanted to make the contact, and they were very ambitious. So
weren't they going to rescue someone as well?
Yes, the American officer, that was Second Lieutenant Bill Robertson, because he didn't obey his order, when he returned to the headquarters, he was arrested and announced that he would be court-martialed. But later on, when they recognized, the generals, that now the link up happened and that this contact, of course, they wanted it, so they released him, and later on he became a hero.
Wait, correct me if I'm wrong. The powers that be wanted someone higher up to make the link up with Russia. And because of the extreme zealousness of this second lieutenant trying to rescue people, he actually was the one that went up on the castle and didn't wave a white flag because that would mean surrender. He actually found something to color it to make it look like a makeshift flag. I mean, he went to a lot of effort to get court-martialed. But anyway, so he was able to get the Russians to trust that this wasn't a trap. And just imagine, you really painted a picture of them going across the bridge and not knowing, is this a trap or not? And so he endured all that only to be almost court-martialed. But then tell us what happened.
The soldiers, they were very glad about the contact, and they became friends. Lieutenant Bill Robertson and Lieutenant Alexander Silvashko, that was the officer of the first Ukrainian front, the soldiers on the other riverside, they were really happy. They became friends, and they met each other again. Years ago, here in Torgau, we have a big festival. It's called the Elbe Day, and they for several times they met each other again.
We have a picture of them like 40 years later.
Yes, they met each other again, 1985. So that was 40 years after the link up here in Torgau, and they became residents of Honne here in Torgau.
Now, this flag, the makeshift flag, we also have a picture after he was thrown in the clink. He was thrown in jail, but then he went he got promoted twice. First time, we don't have a picture of it, and then tell us about that second picture.
Yeah, he started as a second lieutenant, but later on a general who wrote to his patrol, he congratulated the soldiers, and he said that was so extraordinary what happened at Torgau. He promoted each member of this patrol one rank, so Bill Robertson became first lieutenant. But later on, then General Eisenhower, when he got the informations what happened at Torgau, he invited this patrol again, and Bill Robertson, he was a very smart person. Later on, he studied medicine. He gave this flag, this hand-drawn flag, as a gift to General Eisenhower. And he liked this story and what happened at Torgau so much, so he promoted again each member of this patrol. So only 1 week, Bill Robertson became a captain.
Right. From jail to captain. Yeah. That's how you do it. Yeah. Okay. Also, let's talk about the monument itself and the fact there's barely a mention of the U.S. there.
Yes, it was constructed in order of the Soviet Army just a few days after the link up here in Torgau. And it's a monument of the link up. It shows the American and the Soviet flag. But when the construction work was finished in autumn 1945, the Soviet Army didn't invite for the inauguration the American side. So just a few months after the link up here, the Cold War started, and they didn't had a festival together.
But then you showed me, we looked across the river and we saw 3 flagpoles. And you explained to me and then you showed me a picture of what it looks like looking back toward the palace. Explain, please, what that was.
The idea for this monument had the veterans of the Second World War, and they wanted to create a new monument. And this monument normally shows the 3 flags, the American and the Russian flag. And the Allied said, today, after so many years of peace between our nations, we want to have a monument added as well as the German flag. So normally it shows these 3 flags, but since 1.5 years, of course, we have a problem, the Ukrainian war. So today you can't see these flags. One reason for it is that the soldiers on the other side who made the contact with the American soldiers, they were members of the first Ukrainian front. So of course for Torgau it's a special tragedy, the Ukrainian war.
And that was my day. And I think it was rushed and it should be taken over a weekend, as Anya said. Now, let's tell our travel advisors how to get more information.
They can contact us, can see our homepage, which is www.tic-torgau.de, and we are happy if we can give them information they need. We have tour guides as Birgit who can guide groups in English through town, and of course there are a lot of possibilities to go for individual travelers. We developed a tour which can be shown on your phone, so people get all information they need if they want to visit Torgau.
Thank you both for showing me and opening my eyes, and I hope it helps all you guys know more about the area too. And this is Alan Fine for Insider Travel Report.